Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Queer Black Excellence and Rainbow Arcade Summit. Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? Welcome to the Disability and Accessibility for LGBTQIA2 plus panel. Um, Yeah, hi. So this is a panel going to be featuring a lot of folks who are professionals and creators who are consistently working towards better accessibility representation in the gaming industry and also from broadcasting as well. I am Nicole Landonio, or you can call me Nico. My pronouns are she and they, and I'll be your moderator for today. So, before we head on to our discussion, I would like to say thank you to everybody so far, from all the panelists, for the moderators, and everybody who have participated. Thank you to Cody as well, who's working behind the scenes and putting the captions up and working behind. So, yeah, thank you everybody also in the chat as well for supporting everybody within the panels as well. So, yeah, let's get our introductions up. So I'm gonna go starting from the overlay on the stream. So Cherry, if you would like to introduce yourself and let the folks know what your pronouns are.
Oh my gosh, no pressure. Go fast, it's cool. Hi everybody.
No pressure.
So gosh, I said this earlier that I tend to do this thing where I'm just like, oh no, now I was prepared, but I'm not. But hi,
it's okay to be a mess.
Thank you. I am Cherry Thompson, or Cherry Ray on the internet. And I am a games developer at Ubisoft. My official title is the Accessibility Project Manager. I've been a professional accessibility and sensitivity specialist in games for about 5 years, and I've been involved with games accessibility for about 10, just over 10. My previous career was in film, art, and comics, amongst other things. But I have a background in the wider accessibility and disability rights movement for about 12 years now. And I have been a lifelong activist in queer spaces. I've been making content online for 18 plus years. I am disabled myself. I'm also autistic, bi, and non-binary. I'm a board member for GamerX and an ambassador for Take This, who are two leading nonprofits in the gaming space. And this year I won an award for the Canadian Game Awards, and it's really weird, but I was told I'm supposed to say that. No, it's someone else's turn.
No worries, Cherry. Thank you. So, Steve, if you don't mind introducing yourself and let the folks know what your pronouns are as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Steve Smallin. I am the Chief Operations Officer of Able Gamers, the charity helping people with disabilities improve and have a greater quality of life through video games. You may have seen me around the internet, often on videos like with Ryan Reynolds. I just got tagged by Jake Tapper over the weekend on CNN. So I'm usually out there talking about disability and representing as best I can. I am a Twitch ambassador, which just means that I'm somebody trying to represent disability culture up on the big stage and make sure that we have a seat at the table working with Twitch to think about disability a little bit more often. I've won awards from South by Southwest, the Game Awards, stuff like that. But rather than talk about my accolades, I'm just a guy trying to make the world a better place. And I do that by trying to shine a light on something like disability that often gets forgotten. So that's why I'm happy to be here and an honor to be with all these wonderful people.
Oh, Steve, you're so sweet. And we appreciate you being here as well. So thank you for that introduction. All right, so next would be Sightless Combat, if you don't mind letting the folks know what your pronouns are and also your introduction.
Yep. Hello, everybody. I am Sightless Combat. Feel free to call me Sightless Combat or SK as well, should you wish. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am an accessibility consultant and gamer without sight. So if you're wondering what a gamer without sight is, some people would technically say I'm blind, but I use the term gamer without sight because legal blindness can and often does include usable and or residual vision, which I've never had. So basically just to make sure it's not as vague as it might be. I have absolutely no sight whatsoever. So I stream on Twitch. I'm an Xbox Ambassadors Community Champion, which basically means the Xbox ambassadors are people who are trying to make the Xbox community and gaming in general a safer, more positive, inclusive place for everybody. And the community champions are a large variety of individuals who essentially, sort of take that to the next level. So doing, feedback and, various specializations. I write reviews for my website. I post lots of accessibility things on Twitter when I put content up on YouTube as well. And I've gone around various studios and done presentations and talked at various events about accessibility and including representation as well, which we will probably come to later. But yeah, so I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you very much for having me along on this very interesting panel, which I think will also be a really entertaining and enjoyable thing as well.
Yes. Thank you, SK. All right, so our next panelist is Dinook. If you don't mind letting the folks know your pronouns and your intro as well.
Hi friends, my name is D or D-Nug or Nug, whichever you prefer. My pronouns are he and him. I've been living with diagnosed Crohn's disease and ADHD for 20 and 18 years respectively, so I've had it for a long time. I do stream on Twitch. I stream Final Fantasy 14 and some World of Warcraft. I'm a big fan of MMOs, and our community kind of has a mixture, some neurotypical and neurodivergent kind of communities and people. So it's always like a learning experience for all of us, which I kind of promote and I want everyone to be aware of.
Aw. Dinook, you're so cute.
Stop.
Alrighty. Hello, I am still the Rainbow Bard. My pronouns are still anything. I have chronic migraines as well as bipolar, as well as a bunch of other fun things, because as I'm sure everyone on the panel knows, when you have one health issue, they tend to compound and you just get a whole barrel of fun. So yeah, I am newish to the whole trying to raise awareness for accessibility and disability in gaming. And I'm truly honored to be on this panel with so many amazing people that I've looked up to for such a long time. But okay, I'm gonna shut up.
No, keep talking, Rain. It's great. All right, but last but not least on our panel, it's Mike. If you don't mind introducing yourself as well and let the folks know your pronouns.
Hello, I am Mike, as Nico said, also Super Callie on the internet. I reply to Mike, Super Callie, Super Callie, Dork. Like, as long as it's not insulting, I'll probably say hi. I go
cute.
by he, him. Okay, thank you for that. I go by he, him, and I am a heart disease survivor. I've born with it, and like Rain said, though sometimes when you have one big problem, it kind of roller coasters into a lot of others, but that heart disease is what I've struggled with my whole life. And I'm just happy to be here. So hello, I'm not a professional, but I'm happy to be here.
That's a lie. First of all, we're all professionals, okay? We got to represent our people, you know what I'm saying? Alrighty, so I think this topic is going to be a little bit heavy depending on what it is, but so one of the things that we're going to talk about is being in a very diverse space. So if you will all like to put your thoughts in, letting the folks know what your experiences are when it comes to either being disabled or being LGBTQIA plus within your workspace or within like content creation as well within your community. So yeah, let the folks know how or what your experiences are and how y'all feel about that.
I can go first.
Gina, would you like to go first?
I'll go first.
Yes, please do.
So for me, I have Crohn's and ADHD are two kind of disabilities that you can't immediately see straight away. So we consider them kind of invisible illnesses. So for me, first coming out as LGBT, so gay, was like a coming out process for me. And then having to again, and this isn't just a one-off occurrence, sometimes having to explain what Crohn's is, why I need to have multiple bathroom breaks, why I need certain kind of accommodations available to me. Likewise with my ADHD, it's like a constant coming out process. It is one of those things where it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's something that you do throughout your entire lifetime. And so while it can be draining, and the hope is that eventually people are well enough educated or versed in other people's struggles, there's a level of empathy there where you kind of look sideways into what someone else is dealing with, but I don't have to do that. But for me, it's been like a bit of a roller coaster. It's been one of those things where I didn't very much come out or let everyone know about my Crohn's, about my ADHD, because it was one of those things where I feel like in the society we live in, it's easier to, or it's very, very easy to try and fit a mold and like go with the flow. But it became incredibly hard as someone who doesn't fit in that flow to then try and force myself in there. So when I became more vocal about my, being out LGBT, having ADHD, having Crohn's, it kind of opened this avenue where I was able to connect with more people, because I think there's a lot of us who struggle with a lot of things in silence, because it's one of those things where it's easier to not talk about it than it is to talk about it. But it's so important to talk about it, because it is one of those things where if you don't, it can just go, unregistered. And you feel like, especially for me at least, I felt alone for the longest time because I didn't have anyone else who I could kind of relate with. But then me being out and being able to talk about it meant that other people could connect with me, and it kind of opened that avenue of conversation, which was awesome for me.
Dinug.
Stop! Don't make me cry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I feel like I can really relate to the whole invisible illness thing. So like with chronic migraines, especially, like you can't tell, like by looking at me if I'm having a flare up or not. Like, I mean, sometimes you can, because I'll be like, oh, please, no more light or sound, but for the most part, you really can't tell unless I'm willing to tell you. And I feel like that is kind of, I don't know, like I feel like I struggle with having to disclose my disability to certain people, but at the same time, I'm not ashamed of it, but it's just sort of like a thing where it's like, hey, sometimes I can't play video games nearly to the same capacity as I normally do. Sometimes I can't play certain games because they're too flashy or too loud or whatever. And having a community and having friends and having companies even that understand that is really important. And I think is part of why I'm willing to, shout it from the rooftops, like, hey, I'm disabled and here's what I want. And let's work together and get this done.
Yay!
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, no, if I may, in that, I mean, leading on from both of those, it's kind of an interesting point that, in terms of actually being able to sort of disclose your disability, as as it was put just then, it's quite cool that part of my job is basically going to studios and saying, look, I have no sight at all. I'll help you make games playable. And they're like, what? So that's always pretty amusing in that sense. But also as well, though, it can be kind of frustrating when you get people saying, oh, how much can you see? Because they
Oh,
they
no.
think that, yeah, exactly, because they think that if I they say, so are you blind? I'm like, yes. And they're like, how much can you see? Because they're going by the definition of legal blindness, which, as I said earlier, often does include usable and or residual vision. So when I say I can't see anything at all, they're like, huh? You can't play? You can't? And I'm like, yes, I can play video games. And then I show footage of me playing Killer Instinct, Last of Us 2, Sea of Thieves, Gears of War, as a franchise, Halo, any number of things. And they're like, no, this isn't happening. And I'm like, yes, it is. And it takes me back to a funny story of, I'll tell in brief. So a few years ago, I was on the Killer Instinct forums when I first started playing the game, and I was playing online, and I was getting absolutely annihilated, but all because the information that sighted players needed was there, but only in a visual format, so they could see when to end their combos to get maximum damage, that kind of thing, and maximum resources. I didn't have that information, so I went onto the Killer Instinct forums and basically said, here's ways you can make this game more accessible as a to players like myself who don't have any sight to work with. And the community rallied around me, other than one individual who said, as as far as I remember, these were the precise words, uh, I work with blind people, they don't play video games, it's not the done thing.
Yikes. That's a big yikes.
And of course that person then promptly got annihilated themselves and left. But it was definitely a rather amusing moment for me. I was just like, well, it is the done thing because I'm playing a video game now. And,
Right, exactly.
yeah, so it's been quite interesting, being able to sort of get around that kind of thing, and people saying, oh, you can't make videos when you're blind, how can you do that? I'm like,
Oh my
when
gosh.
you've got no sight, how can you like video editing is all about color correction and editing footage and whatnot. I'm like,
Mhm.
no, that's not entirely true, because I have no sight and I've been putting highlight reels together for a while. I've been editing videos for a while myself. Yes, I'm using software that's about 6+ years old and is deprecated. Windows Movie Maker looking at you. But that's because there's nothing else that works in terms of accessibility with a screen reader, at least on the same level of, ease of use and, the amount of features it has. The closest thing I can find has a massively steep learning curve and isn't exactly consistent as far as I've heard. But yeah, so it's been a very interesting thing. But I think gradually, as the industry is now shifting towards greater accessibility, with starting with things like the Xbox Adaptive Controller to a point, um, you know, with things like The Last of Us Part 2,
Mhm.
and all the new stuff that's happening with next gen consoles and the capabilities that they have, and even going back as far as when they first said, oh, games are going to be, games can be narrated on certain consoles with the right features and implementation from developers. All of that is starting to take hold now, and it's great to be able to not have to worry as much. It'll take a few years, but the thought is there that I won't have to worry as much about, can I buy this game and be able to play it without having to yell for assistance every 5 minutes because I've got stuck behind a wall. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
just to chime in really quick here, if you guys aren't already following Sightless Combat on YouTube and Twitch, you absolutely should. And you
Oh,
can
that's
see
very
I
how
agree.
well a gamer without sight can play, because oh my gosh.
Yes.
You are
Also,
too kind.
to chime off, one of the biggest things that anyone with a illness or a disability has to face is being told you can't do something because of your illness or disability. And we'll just prove every time that yes, we can. Watch
Mhm.
us. We can tell you
Like we exist. Hello.
we're here.
Yep.
Steve or Cherry, like do y'all experience just being existing when it comes to your workplace or when it comes to your communities as well? Being disabled or being LGBTQIA plus or just being both as well.
Yeah, I think jumping off what Ben said, sorry, Sightless Combat said, I'm really bad with names. That's an autism problem. I apologize. Everyone has multiple names in my head, and trying to keep everyone filed in the right scenarios is very difficult. But sorry, I'll do better. I think that there's been some really interesting conversations on Twitter lately about the line between invisible and visible disability. And I don't think invisible disability is the right term necessarily. Like it depends. You can all have the terms that work for you. But I mean, in general, I think when we say invisible, what we actually mean is that other people don't know enough to see it. And it's not that it is actually invisible. And also,
Yeah.
it's like all disability, it's a spectrum.
Mhm.
And so my disability is very complex, but I have many different diagnoses, and that would take too long to go through, and this is not a doctor's appointment. But I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is like the big one, and then most of everything else is a result of my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it overlaps, it's systemic, and it overlaps with so many different things. It affects my heart. I've had strokes. I've had ruptures in my arteries. I had an artery tear. It affects my muscles, weakness, strength, coordination, severe pain. And then also, like, it actually, for me, doesn't work the same way for everyone, but for me, it affects my GI system as well, and my immune system. So for me, it's very systemic. I have a particularly rare form of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so I've always had this disability. I was born with it. Some people see onset much later on, but for me, I've had symptoms going back to when I was born, basically. Now, the line between where it became visible and between where it became visible, most people see as when I started using mobility aids and then eventually transitioned to a wheelchair. I don't think it is that. Like, looking back, I think it's just that I hid a lot. I hid being autistic a lot. I masked very heavily, especially growing up as a young autistic girl. And it really isn't invisible. Like, there's so many times where I am in pain and I just like go green and like I start sweating and like, or when my heart conditions are acting up and I can't catch my breath and I can't like actually keep up with anyone. Like I've never been able to walk at a normal pace and I've always had a really weird gait because my hips dislocate and things like this. But it just wasn't as obvious to people that weren't in the know. So like doctors didn't catch it, like people, like my family normalized it because it's genetic and it's existed for so there's so many complex things. And I think that's what Dee was also saying about like constantly having to come out, is it's so similar. And again, being autistic, I also have ADHD. That was the first, when I first tried to push it, and that was actually when I got pushed out of my last career. And I often say that I transitioned from my previous career to gaming, and I had big medical events in between that, like strokes and things. And people often think it happened because of my strokes, but it wasn't. The people I used to work for, as I started being more honest about my disabilities and the accommodations I needed, pushed me out in a very abusive way. And I think that is something that people don't realize that you have to take into account when you do expose yourself. And beyond that, similar to what Sightless was saying, that there's so many assumptions people make. Like even when I'm using my wheelchair, people are like, oh, you're not that disabled. You seem very able. You seem to be able to take care of yourself. Not seeing that at home, I have people bathing me. Like I couldn't digest food for a long time. I couldn't eat. Like these are things people don't see, but they make these assumptions because I use a manual wheelchair or whatever, or because I don't have an assistant with me right there and then. And that can be quite harmful. And I think that's something that I really work to try and break down, is that kind of like underlying competitiveness of who's worse off and like who, like all of this. And so that's something for me personally, not in my role as a developer, but personally, that's something I've tried to do in the content creation space, in gaming space, and now in the development space too, because there are way more games developers with hidden disabilities than anyone realizes. And we're all coping quietly, trying not to make a big deal out of it, and trying to just do your job, because honestly, at the end of the day, you just want to make a cool game. And so you don't want to have to be on parade. So I try to also be visible, because I know not everyone else can be, and no one should have to be and put themselves in that space. And so for those of us that are that have that like particular power or talent of being visible and speaking and being strong, because you have to be so strong. And I think that's what everyone here on this panel is everyone is so strong for being visible and open in your communities and building those communities.
Just jumping in real quick here. You mentioned people acting like you're not disabled enough for having like your wheelchair or whatever, where like sometimes I have days where my balance is just completely gone. I'm just, I'm dizzy, I'm falling over, etc. And so I have a cane and like I'll use it on days that I need it, and it's unbelievable. I'm gonna cry again. Oh my God. It's unbelievable.
It's okay to cry. Go ahead.
How many people will tell me I'm too young to have a cane, or I'm not trying hard enough. Like,
right.
And it's like, I'm sorry, did I need your permission to use a freaking mobility aid? Like, if I didn't have my cane right now, I wouldn't be out of the house. I would be at home. So it's like, it's crazy. Well, sorry, I shouldn't even say that. That's so wildly ableist. It's mind-boggling to me that so many people will tell me, or just tell anybody, that they're not disabled enough. And it's like you said, it's not a competition. Like, we're all just trying to game. We just want to be people. So and also, I also got pushed out of a job I was having a really bad flare-up with my migraines, and I had to call out so many times in like a 3-week period. And my boss told me, hey, you're one of my best workers, and I really don't want to have to fire you for your attendance. So will you please quit? And then when you're not having migraines anymore, apply and I'll rehire you. And it was just like,
that's ridiculous.
Oh my word.
It's so interesting to hear how all of us kind of have similar experiences, because I had a reversible ileostomy, so I had an ileostomy surgery 5 years ago. And when you have that surgery, it means that you can't control when you open your bowels. You essentially have this pouch attached to you, and you just have to empty it whenever it fills up. And the second I had that surgery, despite me being such a good worker and hard worker, I lost all of my support at work the second I had to ask for hospital. So I work in clinical research, ironically. And when I asked for hospitals closer to me so I could make less long visits, because I wouldn't be able to, last a 7-hour car journey anymore, I was just told to transition to a side job. You can have this job there, and it was not the job that I wanted. It wasn't the job that I applied for. And you forget how little support there is, maybe not out of maliciousness, but sometimes it's easier to not have to figure out how to help someone deal with something than it is just to say no to them, which is the kind of the hardest thing is, um, people don't want to learn, or they struggle to learn, and it's easy. It comes almost ties into how sometimes you don't really see a lot of visibility of disabled disabilities in games. Sorry, is that like some companies are afraid to try and then fail and get it wrong. It's easier just to not really try at all, because it's easier to have that response, and that kind of almost transitions and translates into when we have IRL work, like real life work. So yeah, that was just a thing that I kind of noticed when we were giving our piece.
Yeah, I do want to
Mm.
say really quickly, really positively, that I've been working at Ubisoft 6 months now, and it's a way more supportive environment for my disabilities, and I've and it's very refreshing. Like
That's good.
because it's something when you work towards it, when people they don't understand, and I think that's the point, is that they often don't understand. You have to educate people, and that's exhausting, and it's emotional labor, and that's why we have to be visible. But when you try to do that, and then people are like, oh, I didn't know that you needed this for your disabilities. Okay, let's do it. That's really refreshing, and that's something that I think is changing in the games industry. It's just really slow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Steve, you
Yeah.
wanted to say something?
Yeah.
So no, I wanted to take the role here of really support, and I'm the cishet guy here, and that is sort of my role here, is to be an ally, right? And that's and something allies don't do enough is listen. And when I hear all of your stories, I think it's worth noting that something that we don't bring enough attention to is the emotional tax that it takes to be an advocate. So there is no certificate program. You don't sign up with some college to become an advocate to learn how to be one. You just start talking one day, and somebody likes what you said, and then somebody else tells them that something you said was cool, and then before you know it, people are listening to what you said, and you're an advocate. And you be an advocate by being that person out there willing to jump in the limelight, and so I think it's important that we pay homage to ourselves and say, this is very difficult work that we do for free. We are out there, we are, living our lives very publicly, and we take trash comments for it. And I've said to many people along the way, I have ruffled the feathers of many advocates along the way because I have no problem being very outspoken. And the thing about doing that is I say, go look at my mentions. My mentions half the time are trash. Every time I bring up the easy mode argument, you should see my mentions. They are telling me to go off myself and all kinds of triggering things all the time. Just because I wanted to let other people play a game. I don't even want to play the damn game. I want other people to be able to play the game. And I'm fighting
Wow.
for them, right? So, and that's just, my tale of it. But for me, it's a weird line to walk, right? So there's ableism and there's ableist words. I just said one right there, my line to walk. I can't walk. So it's technically roll for me, but it's still language that I use. Another good example is invisible disabilities. The founder of Able Gamers has an invisible disability. And you say invisible because it's what people connect with. It's not true. It's actually there. You can see his leg. It's disabled, but it's not actually invisible. Same thing with why I call myself profoundly disabled. Because when you're talking to someone who's never met you before, and you have to get into them really quickly, just quote how disabled you are, it's a great word that I can use to get across to them real quick that I have a lot of needs. I need help eating, help bathing, I need the whole 9 yards. And rather than go through the whole entire speech, I can say it in just one word and then move on with my point. Because in society, they make you constantly do this dance of telling other people who you are, explaining your disability,
Yep.
coming out about it, but don't talk about it too much, but also justify yourself at the same time. But also don't justify too much, but also we want to hear about it. Also tell us about when you feel bad about it, but now you talked about it too much. So it's interesting having to go on that line constantly, and I don't think that people who are not advocates who are just like, wow, you're so inspirational. I don't think they understand that we actually are. Like, if you're out there, and I don't care if you've got 10 followers or 10 million, it doesn't matter. You're still out there showing people who you really are. And I wish more people would sort of stand up and say, hey, I'm proud of you for being willing to take that emotional abuse so that other people can shine.
Hmm.
What a
And thank you
great point.
for
What a great point.
yeah, exactly. And this also gonna segue into our next topic is like, being, either LGBTQIA plus or being disabled, within the space that we're in, within gaming industry, being a content creator, being a broadcaster, how do you all create a diverse and inclusive space for your workplace or within your communities? Like what do you all do to be inclusive as you all are?
Do you mind if I start with this one? Or...
Yeah, go ahead, SK.
So, I mean, as in my role as an Xbox ambassador and a community champion and doing all the things that I've had the great opportunity to do, I end up sort of talking to various different people. And the way I try my best to create an inclusive community is just by saying, come along, watch my streams, watch my videos, have a look at my content, ask me questions, throw me feedback, give me critique, any of that kind of stuff, and go from there. So I will talk. I've events. Rain and I met at an event at FanFest E3 a couple of years ago, and that was just because we were waiting in line for Gears of War, Gears 5 things, and I was like, hey, I can't remember how the conversation actually got struck up, but it was basically just, hey, how are you doing? You enjoying this? You're looking forward to this? And then it was like, I have no sight whatsoever and I play Gears. And then
Hmm.
it kind of went from there pretty much. And, that's how, me sort of clarifying to people how I do what I do and, breaking the ice, as it were, with that. And usually with a few, what are loosely termed as blind jokes. So, I didn't see that coming, whatever. Just breaking, just sort of getting that conversation started is part of it. And then, if people say, oh, if they ask in chat, how are you doing? How are you playing Hellblade? And I'm like, I'm using Parsec because, I need sight assistance for it. And that's the way that it can work. And then I explain how that all works. Being able to give that, that knowledge and information out to other people who might then be able to take it forward and use it in their own work. I've had developers, some very rarely, but I've had developers come into my streams and say hi and have a chat and even just watching, being able to do that helps create that sort of inclusive space, or at least I hope so. And regardless, we try and keep it to the game. I mean, if there are, if people want to vent and whatever, I give opportunity for that as well. To an extent. So if people are having a bad day, they're just like, I'm having a bad day, I want to come and watch your stream. I'm like, yes, come along, feel free, sit down, have a watch and enjoy. And even using language that even saying, oh, have you seen this thing, that thing, the other, making it feel as if I not so much reducing the impact of my lack of sight, but in the sense of trying to engage on the same level. So, people don't have to worry about being correct around me, as it were. They don't have to worry about what kinds of how they ask questions, how they express their thoughts and whatever. And because if they say, oh, I can't say watch, see, whatever, I can't say that. If I then see that, then I'll just be like, you certainly can. I will probably have a good laugh at what you've just said. So fostering the sort of the humor of it as well, keeping that going and keeping it positive is pretty much the best thing I feel I can do to help those conversations happen.
Like Twitch is so Twitch is trying. I feel like our Cafe Ella from Rainbow Arcade, she put this wonderful mega thread on Twitter a while back about how to make your streams accessible to people. So things like closed captions, the size of fonts of closed captions are like the kind of the biggest, the forefront that a lot of us kind of utilize in an attempt to kind of, help inclusivity. Um, for my streams, aside from closed captions, is things like commands. I think I have for the longest time, I used to just be that, haha, he's behind on chat person. It was just a person, oh, he's not looked at chat in a long while, or he's missed this message. And for the longest time, I used to just laugh it off. But then the second I got more vocal about, ADHD and saying, actually, this is just me struggling a lot with ADHD. Like it is just me seeing a word and then going on like a 10-minute rant about this one word I saw and then forgetting where I am. And then people are getting flustered and frustrated. And I stopped apologizing for it. I stopped saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm just me being goofy. I just said no. Like I've got ADHD. I've got a command in chat. Can someone put that in chat? Because 9 times out of 10, someone new comes in, and that's obviously sometimes the first thing they say is, "Yo, oh my god, this person is like not responding to me just yet." So having people in my community who are able to kind of advocate for me when I can't see that and just say, look at his panels. It says here he's got Crohn's, he's got ADHD. Look at this command that says, hey, sorry, he's about behind chat, but he will get to your message eventually. Small things like that help raise awareness in like the best way possible. Because I've actually had people who've come through with that and said, oh my gosh, I have ADHD too. Or even when I have to explain to them what ADHD is, they kind of have this realization where maybe I fall on that spectrum somewhere because I have those issues too. And that's also a big thing, is just talking about it and raising awareness about things, especially on a platform like Twitch, means that people, when they find out more about themselves, are able to then go and like help. Even like our small Discord call beforehand, we had like this moment of enlightenment where we just thought, maybe I'm on the spectrum, maybe I do kind of suffer with this, or not suffer with this, have this. That's like how I kind of in both Twitch and IRL, like in real life, implement like that, is just being vocal about what we have to face and how we live our life, like our normal, why that's different to their normal and why that's okay, but why they should also know what we go through. Kind of like what Cherry was mentioning earlier about, and it's right actually, I think I'm going to avoid saying the word invisible illness because it's true, like it's always been visible. You just didn't know what to look for. Like we can both, person A and person B can both go from here down the stairs. If your goal is to get downstairs, we can both get downstairs. It will take person B a lot more effort or be through a lot more struggle to get there, but they can get there. But it's just seeing that how person B got there and the struggle they have to kind of, the uphill battle they have to face to get there, which is kind of the conversations we need to have. Is we can do the things that you do. We just need some help and some assistance to do it.
Yeah, to chime off that, as someone with ADD myself, I struggle with like the exact same thing when it comes to reading chat. I miss stuff all the time. People get so annoyed with me. I also forget a lot of things because I have a little bit of like memory loss, short-term damage. So people will say stuff in chat and I'll forget. And like, Mike, we just told you like this. I'm like, I'm sorry, I have a bad memory. And some people will be like, well, are you sure that's not an excuse? And I'm like,
no.
no, I
Whoa.
literally have a little bit of like damage to my brain from my heart because I, at one point in my life, had 20% of the blood pump into my heart to, all the other organs, and it caused some damage. That's why I have ADD. That's why I have a little bit of PTSD from surgeries, and why I have a little bit of memory loss problems. And it's sometimes it doesn't matter how many times you say it, people will always still think that or just not understand. And it's just one of those things. Like, I started streaming because I wanted to make a safe space for people that could relate to me in some way, or I could like be a good like role model or something for people, whether they're LGBT, whether they have a disability or a illness. Like, I just wanted to show people it doesn't matter who you are or what you have, you can still do what you want to do. And it's still frustrating because even you can educate people a million times, and sometimes they'll be too ignorant or too not understanding enough to like get it. So like, just educate yourself and listen to what someone's telling you. So you have to repeat yourself constantly.
Right. Does anybody have like last thoughts about that before I want to get into a very important topic?
I'll jump in real quick with mine. I feel like for me, the way I try and foster it is really by listening and following other disabled creators, like Steve here, like Sightless, like Cherry, and knowing that disability is so widely different depending on who you are. Like, you know, like, yes, we are all disabled here, but if you look at us, we are all wildly ourselves, you know, like it's such a spectrum. And I feel like one of the most important things you can do is seek out as much information as you can, listen to as many advocates as you can, and look for, hey, you know what, how does this person do this? I should look that up and I should learn. And I feel like that's something that everybody could do more, is listen.
Mhm.
I'll agree with that. I think that the only thing I can add to this is perhaps a bit controversial. I think we are all shepherds. I think that when it comes to communities, we are the shepherds that keep the wolves away. And I think that when you accept that role, you have to also accept the role that sometimes you have to be the bad guy to the bad people. Sometimes if someone comes into my community and they say REEE, which is a slur against autistic people, you get a warning. And I will tell you, don't do that again. It's not cool. And if you do something again or you laugh about it, you're out. If you say a racist joke, you're out. If you use the F word, you're out.
Mhm.
You know, if I believe that what you did was intentional to hurt someone, you don't get a second chance. You're out. It's my community. I'm the arbiter of the community, and I don't think that you have good intention for my people. So therefore, you're out. And I think that's how you keep a good community, is by guarding the ones you have. You know, it's what I try to tell people about community creation. It's really easy to get people to follow you. People think it's hard. Oh, how do I get followers? How do I get followers? It's not followers. It's retention. How do you
Mhm.
keep the ones that you got? How do you make the ones that came to you feel like they're safe and valued and loved? Because if you can't do that, they're just going to leave anyway. So be willing to fight the bad guys.
Yeah, that was what I did with I was streaming and I recently left, but I have a lot of experience in community management from previous careers, and something that's very clear is if you don't establish your boundaries and the rules from the beginning, you will not have a safe space. And I think that rules get this like bad rep, but like, you know what, as an autistic person, I like rules because they help me to know what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, what that space even means for people. And it makes people feel safe and protected, and like you will stand up for them and your mods will stand up for them when they need to. And you will step in front of that, uh, whatever happens. And I think you have to stick to it too. But we all have bad days, and that's why I think also moderators and surrounding yourself with support is also really important, because you can't always be that person. Sometimes you're not up to it. Sometimes you're, you know, some things with your disabilities or your mental health is going to interfere with that. And that's why your team is important and your community in general. Once you've got that community, they'll start to do a lot of that work for you, which is just like kind of magical when that happens. You're just like, oh my God, I'm not in control of this train anymore, but in a good way. What? But that's like my personal experience. But now I'm in a position of working inside a very large company where I get to help and support amazing people that want to make a difference and make the community better, and are working really hard to build programs, to expand programs, and make those programs work in a way where we're learning, because that's what everyone's been saying, is you have to listen. And in order for that space to be comfortable and welcoming and supportive, you listen to the people you're working with. And so that's what we're doing at Ubisoft as well, is making sure that we're learning, because it is a learning process. And sometimes it's just about like, you just don't know. And that's very different to obviously harassment issues, but it's more like making sure that, like Sightless Combat was saying, that people just don't know how to say certain things or don't know how to speak about certain things if they don't know people in that community or they don't have that experience themselves. And so it's making sure to say to people, when you're working with someone that you don't have that experience, it's like, look, this is your space, and I want you to feel comfortable. How do you refer to yourself? What language do you use to refer to yourself? Do you prefer person first? Do you prefer identity first? And then you use that. And also, we don't make assumptions for people, which is something we've been learning, is we cannot decide whether a game is accessible to someone or not. That is not our job. It's never been our job. It's never something we're trying to do. And it's something that I think the industry in general is coming towards and coming to learn. And I think that we really want others to join that with us and learn that with us, is that we can expand our content creation programs and things and make those safer spaces by listening and learning with the community and working with people as we go. And that's been a big lesson. But I know you wanted to move on, Nico. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I love and I appreciate your all your everybody's input in the topics that we're talking about, because it's very, very important. I did mention this in the group chat that we had, and Steve also mentioned this as well, is that we're often forgotten as people, especially within when it comes to the gaming industry, or when it comes to within communities as well. It's just it tends to happen a lot. And so I feel like having this panel and having this discussion with you all is very important to bring so much more acknowledgement and recognition, and also acceptance as well. So before we head off and close everything up, I just want to ask everyone really quick if you want to say like 1 or 2 sentences, but what does representation look like to you when it comes to being disabled or being LGBTQIA plus too? That's a very
I'll start if no one else will.
Take the stage, Sightless.
Fair enough. So even just because Steve pointed out his sort of orientation as well. I'm cis het myself, but even so, being a gamer without sight, having no sight at all, there's very few examples of representation. I did a panel on this at EGX Res. I was part of a panel on this, and my research only turned up a couple of examples. So Perception and Beyond Eyes are both examples of games that could have been accessible but weren't, because they decided to not just use audio, or not have enough accessibility to be played without being able to see at all. They instead added visuals to that and tried to create a world that sighted players could understand. That's a great idea, but if you can't play it, work with the people who you're trying to represent, as well as everyone, as well as other players as well. Get as many people involved as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There are characters. I've always said in Sea of Thieves, I'm a pirate with an eye patch over both eyes. People are like, wait, what? And then they're like, you're trolling. I'm like, no. and then they see how well I can steer a ship.
Yes.
So, and that's always quite cool to be able to show. But I'd love to be able to say, I'm a Spartan in Halo and I've got no sight, but because of the helmet, I'm able to, because of the gear my Spartan's wearing, I'm able to do all this, that, and the other. That'd be really cool. But
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't quite happened yet. I'm really curious to see what the first game will be where I can actually, fully see myself in a character.
For me, it's like a little different. For me, I don't need to see myself or my disabilities per se, but I just need to see disabilities represented, or probably as a blanket term, because so I play a game for Final Fantasy 14, and in it, I'll try and avoid spoilers. There's a character who goes through a battle and they end up losing a limb, and there's none of this kind of savior. I hate using the word fixed complex, where they suddenly get they're healed and they suddenly grow their arm back, or they get a bionic arm and suddenly they're able to carry on being badasses. This person has a struggle, goes through a struggle, loses a limb, but carries on being the same character he was before. They don't change the narrative. They don't change him to be this person who needs to be healed, or the person to be protected anymore. There's a similar comparison that happens in Overwatch. I'm not sure if anyone plays Overwatch, but there's a character called Symmetra, and they kind of mention in one of her comics that she has autism. She says, there's a line where she says, I know I'm on the spectrum somewhere. And so sentences like that, even though I don't have autism and I don't have, a loss of limb, seeing those characters there, having that kind of conversation, I think even that comic had, there was a young person who sent Jeff Kaplan an email or a Tumblr message or something, which basically just asked for clarification. Is this true? Is this Symmetra? Does she have autism? And he responded and he said, yes, that's her story. That's in her narrative. It's said in the comics. And the same for Final Fantasy 14. They never made this person a weak, or they didn't change who he was. He was just carried on being this badass. For me, that's the more I want to see. I don't want to see a side character who, is in a wheelchair, who has a funny one line, and then it's like representation for you. No, like I want like a pivotal character. I want a main story
Yeah.
character to have one of those things and not be like remedied. That's just their life. That's their story. Because there is no fix all for anyone IRL. Like for us, who live with these kind of conditions, we don't get to drink a potion and suddenly now we're superhuman and we don't have any problems anymore. Like we have a life to live with this. That for me, that's something I'd like to see. Is more of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
that makes sense.
the thing about it is, I think if you take that one step further too, is stop making disabled people the bad guy. I'm really tired
Oh
of
Oh
it.
my
yeah,
gosh,
Mm.
yeah.
I'm
always the villain. Like
always the
why?
villain.
Always.
Always. And it's not only just the villain, it's always the villain who is not attractive in any way, just has a bad
Mhm.
attitude, is physically unattractive. They make them as ugly inside and out as humanly possible. And then on top of it, they add disability to drive it really home that they're bad. And I'm under so many NDAs. A golden robot could pop out of my closet and beat me down live on stream. So I have to be careful what I say here. But anybody who works in the game industry knows like this is a trope that they fight with almost constantly. And I think that game companies are doing better. I think that we're working on it, and it's becoming a thing. But it's taking some real push from the community, everyone here and everyone in chat who single handedly comes together in one voice and says, "Stop doing this. Stop juxtaposing the good, beautiful person with the able-bodied person, with the disabled, ugly person. Like it is not. You can't do that. You can't put everything as if disability is inherently bad. There are people that I've known, and all of us in this chat, I would damn near bet every dollar I've had, who are disabled, who are good guys, who are bad guys, and who are everything in between. We are shades of gray. So I think that one of the things I would like to say in my 2 sentences is stop making disability a juxtaposed to good. It's not.
Yeah, and also stop making characters that the only thing about them is their disability. Like, we want representation that's positive, and we don't want to have to go back to talking about it every 5 minutes because that's not what we're about.
Yeah, we want
Yeah.
full blown characters really, rather than just
Yeah,
a sort of flat one-dimensional
Mhm.
exactly.
sort of element. But also as well, if characters, if there are, it kind of goes beyond that as well. Allow people to access these pieces of representation as well. If it's in a comic, make it accessible so that people like myself, people who can't read comics for whatever reason, can access it. If it's in a CG cutscene, give that cutscene audio description, for instance. I know I'm solely talking from my perspective at the moment, but there are, give it closed captions if it doesn't have it already. Give images alt text so that even if you can't see it, you still get a point. Give transcripts. All of this stuff can help make these characters reach a greater audience. That's the key thing. Get as many people as possible, not just involved in the sort of consulting process or the process of constructing these characters in whatever way, shape, or form that is, but also make it so that everybody can enjoy these characters and experience the stories that are being told and all of that. Make sure everybody can be immersed in the great things that you're creating.
Exactly. Does anybody else want to say
Yeah, I'm gonna
anything before we
jump in
close it out?
again.
Yeah.
So, certain things that I've seen that I'm sure some of you guys in the chat have also seen, is recently I can't remember who did it, and I'm really sad that I forgot about it, but they made miniatures for Dungeons and Dragons that were wheelchairs, and they actually sent them out to people who are disabled who wanted to have a mini of somebody in a wheelchair. And it's like the discourse around that really bums me out, that you will find people who will straight up tell you wheelchairs don't belong in D&D, and it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
F you, wheelchairs belong anywhere anybody is. Like,
Yes.
um
They've always existed.
exactly. And so, okay, so another thing that I wanted to say was, for me, seeing, like Dee said, just seeing any sort of disabled characters in media that aren't vilified for being disabled. Like, I feel like I mentioned this earlier, but Tell Me Why really surprised me in how they handled their mental illness in there. So like I said, I have bipolar, and so that illness especially I feel like is very vilified in the media. And I feel like they kind of touched on, oh, maybe she's bipolar, or maybe she's this or that. And it seemed like it was going to be an issue. And I felt like when I was playing this game, I was like, oh man, this is some bad disability rep. Like, I'm bummed about this. And when I beat the game and I found out what actually transpired, I was a mess. I was crying and I felt so seen, because it was just like, I could see that, like, it was just so real. And it was just so well done that it really felt like they had really done the work and talked to people to have it be a really well done story, and not just be up, this person has a chronic illness and they're evil now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. I'm
Right.
crying again. So I'm gonna shut up.
It's okay, Rain. You're good. Cherry, did you want to say
Yeah,
something before? Yeah.
I could actually talk about this for a long time. People that know me already know this, but I actually gave a talk at the Games Developers Conference 2 years ago now. It was the first and only talk on disability representation ever given to developers at this conference, which is the world's biggest conference for games developers. And that really shows how behind we are with disability representation compared to everything else. And so there's so many different things I could dig into, having done this professionally for a long time now. And worked on this on games. But I guess I just want to really say that it really does overlap with all other areas of representation. And I think what's really important is that that characters are multifaceted just like people are. We don't exist in boxes. We aren't just disabled. We aren't just this. We aren't just that. And so like that's what we really need to move towards. The next step is like people just like characters just happen to be disabled, just like they just happen to be LGBTQIA+, or just like they just happen to be of any particular race or gender. And like all of these things can occur together, like all of us on this panel who are very multifaceted. And that's what I'm tired of, is like really separating us like that from a personal perspective. And then from a professional perspective, it's kind of about making sure that when we listen to people, that we're really careful in how we do that. If we put individuals in the space of being solely responsible for that representation, we put them in a difficult space, in a bad power dynamic. And I think what's really important is, yes, use focus groups, work with the community, but get a diverse group of voices, because one person cannot represent everyone. And then make sure you have experts and sensitivity specialists and consultants check that work too. So it needs to be like multi-stages, right? And so that's what we're trying to work on the games I'm working on, is making sure, okay, first of all, how do we catch the mistakes? Because we all make mistakes and we're human and we're just reflective of the world and the attitudes that exist in the world. And I think that's okay. Like in order to try, we sometimes have to make mistakes. We just have to learn from them together. And so how do we do that? And then work with the community to make sure that we're representing people in kind ways, because like Steve said, that's been my biggest problem with representation. And my talk was very emotional and included a clip. So don't feel bad of crying, because the clip I included in that talk at the Professional Games Developers Conference was me losing it over an autistic character in a game called To the Moon, like literally losing it on stream, like hyperventilating, crying. And like, I think those are the important things for people to see, is how that affects people, how good representation affects people, but also how the tropes affect us and how they hurt us. It's not just like, oh, they've hurt our poor feelings. It's that they literally hurt how people are treated day to day and how we're treated by those around us. And that's important for developers to see, because developers are kind people. They care about their community. They care about the players. They care about getting it right. It's just sometimes they don't know. And so we have to work together and bridge those gaps. And that's the work we're trying to do with the teams that I work with in my day-to-day. And so that's kind of my take on it, even though I could talk for hours on that whole subject. But oh, I had kicked my camera because I had
You're
a
all
leg
good, you're all
spasm.
good.
talking about hidden
But-
disabilities. My leg was like, done. Sorry, you're out.
So I know that we're like out of.
Fortunately,
I know that we're almost out of time. Can I say one thing real quick, Nico?
Yeah,
I'll
of
keep
course.
it 20 seconds. So everything Cherry just said also applied to humans as well. So
Mhm.
my thanks to Rainbow Arcade for inviting me here today to add whatever value I could, and for Tanya and I Need Diverse Games and everyone out there fighting for inclusion and diversity in all aspects of life. Thank you all. You're all a bunch of champions. I want to
Yay!
say
Yay!
Yay.
And thank you everybody for being here. Thank you all. But we're gonna do some outros real quick. So we're gonna start off with Mike.
Me. Hi everyone. Thank you all for watching. My name is Super Callie. You can find me with that name on all social media. And also PSA, stop using the re-emote. It's actually offensive.
Right.
That's
thank
all.
you.
You're welcome.
All right, Rain.
Hi, I am the Rainbow Bard. I don't have a schedule because of my disabilities, but you can find me live on Twitch whenever I'm having a good head day. On what is my name again? The Rainbow Bard. That's me. I'm also on Twitch. Oh my God. I'm also on Twitter. I try to be funny there as well as bring awareness to anything I think is important. And gosh, there's a whole lot of it out there. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Alrighty, D-Nug.
Hi everyone, I'm DNUG Life everywhere: Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Pronouns like he, him. I stream on Twitch 4 days a week, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, every other day. And yeah, that is me. Thank you for having me, everybody.
SK.
So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I am Sightless Combat. Pronouns are he, him, his. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube as @Sightless Combat. So SIGHTLESSKOMBAT. And yeah, I stream relatively regularly, not only on my own channel, but I also host streams on the Xbox Ambassadors channel as well. So Wednesday and Thursday are my personal streams, and then Sunday is the Xbox Ambassadors stream, though that schedule might change in the future. I look forward to having good discussions about accessibility with all of you at some point soon. So again, thank you to Rainbow Arcade for having me. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, whatever part of the world you're in.
Yes. And Steve.
And stay safe, of course.
Yes.
My name is Steve Smallin again, spelled like the Twitch way, down below. My real name spelled SPOHN. You can find me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram with the blue checks, and you can find me streaming on Twitch Wednesday through Sunday, 5 days a week. I am so tired. Wednesday through Sundays. Tomorrow I'm actually streaming with Dr. Lupo and Grand Poo and State Farm, raising money for able gamers, which
Yes.
you can also
That's
find on
awesome.
Twitter and Twitch and Facebook, all under the Able Gamers moniker. Our entire goal is to make people's lives better through video games. So if you have time to give to the cause, highly recommend you come check us out. Or if you need help yourself, we're probably your answer.
And Cherry.
I am Cherry Ray. Following everyone is kind of amazing. Going last, like, thank you everyone. This has been and work with people that I've worked before. I just think this is a wonderful panel, and I don't stream anymore, and I'm very sad about it, and I miss it so much. I'm gonna get emotional. But you can find me on Twitter, where I have many personal opinions, not the opinions of Ubisoft, but I am very opinionated, and sometimes to my detriment. But also, I do try to be funny and supportive and create a and then if you follow any of Ubisoft's platforms, you will probably see my work anytime the word accessible, or most times the word accessibility is mentioned, and the work of so many developers that that do care about this and making sure that these spaces become more inclusive.
Thank you, Cherry. And I am the moderator. My name is Nicole Londoner. You can call here with Nicole Londonio. I talk a lot about, activism when it comes to the deaf and hard of hearing folks, because I do ASL, because I try to be as accessible as much as I can, also having closed captions. I'm just a chubby, queer, disabled person. that likes to game and stuff.
you.
But yeah, thank you to everybody for being here. I hope you're playing games with difficult content. So come and stick around, and I hope to see you around. Thank you for supporting.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.